Hello everyone. I've decided to start a little series of videos about how to develop virtual reality applications using the Vrui Virtual Reality Development Toolkit. And in order to get started, we are going to go through the rigmarole and all the boilerplate of actually installing Vrui and setting it up, and then starting a new project and actually writing a very small VR Hello World application, so to speak. Okay, so let's dive right in. We are going to start by installing Vrui from our GitHub repository, and I'm not going to clone the repository. I don't want to go through that whole thing. We are going to follow the simplified installation instructions that you can find here on the documentation site that I'm clicking on right now, which is Vrui VR, vrui-vr.github.io. And then what we are going to do is we're actually going to go to the AR Sandbox subsection, and we are going to click on Getting Started and Software. And this is still a little bit under development, so this might change where exactly things are. But we are going to be following the simple installation guide, just to make it as painless as possible, so we don't have to deal with all the requirements and prerequisites and what have you. Okay, so the simplified installation instructions assume that you have a Linux computer, that you're running a distribution that is one of the two big families, either Red Hat or Ubuntu. So this particular computer here is running Fedora, but the same instructions work for Ubuntu or Linux Mint or any of those families of Linuxes. And additionally, because we are going to be obviously installing a VR toolkit and developing VR software, we also do need a computer with a discrete graphics card and the drivers for that graphics card installed. Specifically on my computer, I have an NVIDIA graphics card. This should in principle work with AMD graphics cards, but I honestly haven't tried one of those in a long time. And if you do have an NVIDIA graphics card, we not only strongly recommend, but it's basically required, that you install the vendor supplied NVIDIA driver, not the open source Nouveau driver. It's just that support in the Nouveau driver is still a little bit crusty in order to get Vrui working properly. Okay, so the simplified installation instructions do not do the usual process of cloning a Git repository and going configure and make and what have you. It's essentially using a very simple homegrown little package manager that's specific to all the Vrui packages that we've put out. And it's called PullPackage. And so what we do is we're going to first install PullPackage. So we just have to enter this command right here into a terminal window. I'm just going to copy that to the clipboard, then go over to my terminal window and paste it in. And then we're just going to hit enter. And this is going to ask us for our administrator password in order to install a couple of things in a system directory, specifically in /opt/PullPackage. So I'm going to enter my password. Okay. And then there we go. PullPackage is successfully installed. And then the next thing we have to do, and again, ignore the fact that we're on the AR Sandbox webpage now, but the only thing we're going to install is Vrui using the PullPackage Vrui command. So we're going to copy that to the clipboard again, paste it in here, and just hit enter after PullPackage Vrui. And that is going to do the correct thing. It's going to pull, I'm going to scroll up here while it's doing this. Is going to take a moment. What it did is it pulled all these required system packages like GCC and zlib and OpenSSL and whatnot. And again, this works for the Red Hat and Ubuntu families of Linux distributions. Then it is grabbing a packaged version of Vrui itself, and then it just starts building it. So here we have the build information for Vrui. And as we can see here, we are getting Vrui version 14.1. And here we have the installation directories. This is not really important. The only thing you should make note of is here the /opt/Vrui-14.1/share/make. That's the build system installation directory. We are going to be needing that later. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back down. Vrui is busy building itself. And we just have to, wait until that is all done. And that's it's going to take a moment. As I said, this video is going to be about all the quite boring, annoying rigmarole of going through all the installation steps and setup steps and what have you. Okay. It's going to take a little bit longer. It's currently building all the default Vrui tools, and then the Vrui Wizlets and the VR device daemon. And hopefully it's going to be done any moment. Okay, looks good. We are now linking stuff, means we are almost done. I forgot to mention that the PullPackage script also grabs the collaboration infrastructure, which we don't really need for this, but doesn't really hurt to have it. It's all good, and it's pretty quick to install. And then finally, it's grabbing the example programs, which we also don't really need. Building all of those, okay. And then, well, we're done. Okay, perfect. So that was step one of the thing that we were going to do today, which is download and install Vrui. Specifically, we installed Vrui 14.1, and it is in /opt/Vrui 14.1. So if you want to look into that directory, you're going to see that there is, there's a bin, etc, include, lib64, share. So this is the full Vrui build system, build environment with, all the executables. It has all the include files in there. Here are the actual Vrui include files, at least the public-facing ones. And so now we have the Vrui toolkit, and we can start writing Vrui software. And so let's go and start a new Vrui project and then set up all of that. That is in a little bit more boilerplate stuff that we have to go through, but I don't think it is all that bad. So when you start a new project, that's true for basically every development toolkit, but specifically for Vrui, I recommend just starting out with a new directory. And I like to put these things into the source directory in my home directory. And then we are going to make a new directory and call it HelloVrui. And then we are going to go into HelloVrui and start working from here. So right now the directory obviously is empty, and the first thing that we need to do, and this is why I asked you to make note of Vrui's build system directory earlier, which is, as you remember, maybe it's in Vrui-14.1, and then it is in share and in make. And in that we find a whole bunch of stuff that is not really important, but what we find in there is a template makefile. And so we are going to just copy over the template makefile to our local directory, and then we are going to set up that template makefile for our new project. So this is very simple. You see, actually I can go cursor up and then cp makefile, just copy it into this local directory. Okay, great. So now we open that up with a text editor, and whatever text editor you want to use, of course, is fine. I like the Genie text editor. Plug for Genie, it's really good. So we are just going to open the makefile in Genie, and here it is. So there's again, this is all boilerplate, boilerplate, boilerplate. A couple of things that we do want to change. So the first thing here, and this is something that we do not want to change, is that we have to point our makefile at the Vrui's make directory. And that is already done by default because we copied the template. This is in /opt/Vrui-14.1/share/make. Then the next thing is we want to set a installation directory for this project. And right now the installation directory is just set to project root, which is the current directory. So that means we are just going to be building the software in tree, and you don't have to run make install to run it. You can just build it and then run it immediately. This is for, ad hoc projects like this. That is a good setting. Of course, if it's a real project, you would want to install it in some actual system place in the end. But let's not worry about it right now. These are the two top settings here. And then the next big section in this makefile is to specify information about this particular project. So we are going to give the project a name, and we're just going to call it HelloVrui. And then we can also give it a display name, which is optional. It just defaults to the project name, but we want to have something simpler. And we can call this like our first Vrui project. Okay. The next thing is we want to set version numbers for the project in order to, do proper semantic versioning, but because we don't really care, we're just going to set the major version to 1 and then the minor and build version both to 0. Okay. And then the next part is just built in. We don't have to do anything here. We don't have to do anything here. And this is the part where we can, and I want to keep this makefile as simple as possible. Just, as few changes as possible, just so that we can see how this all comes together. But one thing that we should do is we should set the list of packages that are used by all of the executables and all the components of this project. And the easiest way to go here is to just say Vrui all. That is going to link the entirety of Vrui against our project, which is probably going to be severe overkill. We are not going to be needing all of that, but it's just going to take a little bit longer. But other than that, it doesn't really hurt. And in a simple project like the one we are going to do, we don't really have to do anything else. Here's where you would specify all your targets. And then here's where you put all your makefile rules, like, for example, here, the build rules for executables. And I'm not even going to bother with that right now because we are just going to be writing some really, really simple stuff. Okay, now all we got to do is save this with the changes. And remember, the only thing we really did is we set a project name and a display name, a version number, and then we just told it to automatically always link against all the Vrui subcomponents. Vrui has a whole bunch of subcomponents. It's gonna do a little bit extra work, but honestly, who cares? Okay, save this, and we are for the moment done with the makefile. I'm just gonna leave it open just in case. Okay, so then the next thing is we can just start writing our first Vrui application, HelloVrui. And we can just going to use Genie for that, and then we call it HelloVrui.cpp. Quick reminder if it wasn't obvious, Vrui is a C++ toolkit, so we are going to be writing some C++ code. Here we go. All right. So then, yeah, we're just, going to write a C++ file, so let's not get too fancy here. I'm just going to put a header into this because, why not? One likes to do that. And we're just going to say hello Vrui, say hello to the Vrui. Whoops. You might notice here in this video that I can't type. So just don't give me grief with that. It's just the way it is. Okay? So no making fun. All right. So now let's actually get started. In order to write any Vrui application, typically what you have to do is, of course, you have to include a couple of header files. And for Vrui, if you write an application, you typically have to include two header files. The first one is Vrui/Vrui.h. So everything Vrui related starts with the Vrui prefix, and then comes the actual name of the file. And in this case, Vrui/Vrui.h is the Vrui kernel interface. Vrui is basically a microkernel architecture, and the kernel interface has all the links to all the other components, input device managers, toolkit managers, scene graph managers, anything we can think of. But that is the one we want to get the very basic functionality. And then if we want to write a Vrui application, then we also want to include the Vrui/application.h header file. Okay. So now let's write our first Vrui application. And the development model in Vrui is that Vrui applications are all derived from a common base class called, big surprise, Vrui : application. So all the Vrui stuff is in the Vrui namespace. So what we do is we create a new class, we call it, I don't know, whatever, HelloVrui, and then we publicly derive that from Vrui : application. Whoops, again, I can't type. You can make as much fun of me as you want. Okay, there we go. Okay. And you can look at the Vrui/application.h header file in order to figure out what all this stuff is. You know what? I'm going to bring that up. So have a look down here at the terminal. We are going to open up opt Vrui. Come on, this is embarrassing. 14.1 include Vrui application.h. And you'll see that here is, that's what the Vrui header file looks like. There's the definition of the base class, and then it has a whole bunch of stuff in there. And basically, it has a constructor and a destructor as usual, and then it has a run method. And then it has a whole bunch of virtual methods that we are going to implement in order to provide the actual application functionality. So don't worry about that too much. We don't need most of this because we are going to keep it really nice and simple. The only thing we do need, and you need this for every Vrui application, is a constructor. So we want all the constructors and destructors. And the one we want is, okay, this is just called, of course, HelloVrui. And a Vrui application constructor takes essentially an application command line. Vrui very clearly grew up in a command line environment. And so what it takes is references to the usual command line parameters that are passed to C applications in the main function, just argc and argv. Only in this case it takes references to those, because components, especially the Vrui application constructor, will change the command line in order to remove all the Vrui specific stuff. So then we call the base class constructor with just argc and argv, and we are basically set with that. And so now we have to actually do something, and we want to, of course, say hello Vrui. And the simplest possible way of saying hello to Vrui is to use a function from the Vrui kernel interface, which is called show error message. Of course, we're not going to show an error message here, but you know who's going to keep track of that. And the error message will have a title. We're just naming that by our application. And then comes the actual error message, which is not going to be an error message in this case. And then comes the text that goes into the button that can make that error message go away. And so we are just going to put OK in there. And that will essentially say hello Vrui. So this is all we have to do in order to make a full Vrui application that says hello Vrui. We have defined the application class. It is a subclass or derived class from Vrui : application. And we have implemented the constructor. So this is pretty much the simplest possible Vrui application that one can imagine. Now there's only one component missing, and that is we have to create a entry point for this application. We have to create a main function. And because I realized after a while that all Vrui main functions look exactly the same, I just made a macro that will just create the main function for us. It's just called Vrui application run, and then we give it the name of the application class, and there's no semicolon at the end. That's just a macro weirdness for you. But that is it. So let's see, we can try. I probably have made 500 typos in there. So let's just build this. Now, in order to build this, we just go back to the terminal, and I'm going to clear the screen, and then we just say make. And because we didn't put anything of this into our make file, we have to tell make, of course, what we are going to build. So we are going to build hello Vrui, and we hit enter. And wow, awesome, that worked. No errors, cool. So if you look now, we have in our directory, we have the make file right here. We have HelloVrui.cpp, which we just wrote. And then we have a new directory, bin, and in bin is the result of building Vrui. So, sorry, of building hello Vrui. So if you look at bin, there's hello Vrui right there. Okay, let's run it. Hello Vrui, and there it is. Okay, and this font is really, really tiny, but it gives us an error message. Well, you know, not an error message, it's more like a welcome message, but there we go. Now, yeah, let's do that again, but let's make the font a little bit bigger. I don't want to talk about this at all, just follow along with what I'm going to do. We're going to override the configuration, and we are going to make UI font text height a lot larger than it currently is. Let's set it to 0.5 to give us really big font. And well, will you look at that? Here is our hello message, hello Vrui, yay! That's pretty much it. We have successfully written our first Vrui application, and it has very friendly told us hello. Yeah, now, I mean, this is not, you know, it doesn't do anything. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can do. I can, yay, show the scale bar. We can look at the Vrui settings. I can change the background color, but then on the other hand, who wants to do any of that, right? So this one doesn't really do anything, and it's also a really pitiful application because Vrui is, after all, a 3D/VR toolkit, and this one isn't even 3D. It only shows us a little dialog box that says hello. But for a first attempt, it's not completely shabby, and you know, we didn't have to do all that much work to set it up. Side note, if you want to get out of a Vrui application, there are multiple ways. You can either right-click in the window with the mouse, and then in the Vrui system dialog, there's a quit program entry down here, and then just, you know, select that. Or you can just close the window by hitting the close button, or you just can hit the escape key. And none of those things will ask for confirmation. Vrui assumes that you know what you're doing, and it will just get out of there. So we are going to be doing it the way I always do, which is hitting the escape key. and there we are. Perfect. So yeah, that was our first Vrui application, and this could in principle be the end of this first introductory video. Quick recap what we've done. We have installed Vrui using the PullPackage mechanism, which was pretty straightforward. We have created a new project directory, HelloVrui. We copied the makefile from Vrui's build system directory into this. We configured the makefile a little bit, not really all that much, just put the project name and the version number and the packages equal Vrui all in there. And then I can now click away this one here. And then we created our tiny little HelloVrui application. But given that it didn't really take us that long to do that, and that this Vrui application is a really pitiful one, let's say make this a little bit more fancy. Let's at least put some 3D text in there so we can, at least see something that's not just a dialog box. I mean, seriously. And I would say that the easiest way of getting text in here is probably to use the scene graph subcomponent that Vrui has and just create a bunch of text. Now, when you think about that, we can either do that programmatically, which means we have to build and link a whole bunch of scene graph nodes, but I don't really feel like it. So what we are going to do instead is we are going to essentially create some assets. We are going to create a 3D model file that will have some text in it, and then we are going to just change our HelloVrui to simply load that model file and display it in the 3D environment. Okay, so let's make a little model file. The typical way how I would do that is to make a directory that has things in there that are not configuration and call that share. And then inside that share directory, we make a, let's say, resources directory, or let's call that models. There we go, share models. And then we are going to make a model file. And we are going to use a text editor for this because Vrui scene graph subcomponent uses VRML, or VRML, virtual reality modeling language. I'm really old school, as a way to specify and load scene graphs or partial scene graphs. So we are going to call that HelloVrui.wrl or world, which is the default extension for VRML files. Okay, so we are going to put that into the text editor, and then we're just going to put together a real quick VRML file. VRML files always begin with a hash mark and then VRML, all uppercase, version 2.0, and then the encoding is going to be UTF-8. All right, and so then we're just going to put our 3D geometry in there. And in VRML, we are going to create a shape node. And the shape node is going to have an appearance, which is of type appearance. You will find that VRML or VRML 2.0 is a little bit redundant. There's all this stuff that you're like, do I really have to specify all of this every time? But then once you start using it, you'll realize it actually makes a ton of sense. So just bear with me here. We're going to give it some diffuse color. You can already imagine what this is going to look like. Some specular color. This is a very advanced lighting model, as you're going to see. And then we're going to give it some shininess, 0.9. And then, now that we have defined the appearance for our shape, we have to define the geometry. And here we are going to use a text node, or for legacy reasons, it is still called fancy text, because there is a regular text and then there's a fancy text. And this is going to be a fancy looking text node because we are fancy people. Okay, so then this has a couple of different fields. And the first one that we have to do is we have to set the font style, whoopsie-daisy, font style. And that is going to be a fancy font style because fancy text goes with fancy font style. And then we have a whole bunch of other settings. We have a font family, and we are going to be using a serif font family. We are going to use a plain style. We are going to use a 2.0 size. And what else are we going to do? We are going to use middle justification. Oh wait, no, that doesn't belong there. I think this should be it. I never remember how any of this works, so we're just going to wing it and see what happens. Okay, so then we probably want to set the we want to set the depth for this because this is 3D text after all. We're going to set it to that. We want to render the front and the outline, and this might give us all kinds of error messages because I really haven't done this in a while. We want to justify this to the middle, And then we can actually put the text in there, and the text is going to be hello Vrui. Okay, I am not sure that this is going to work right now, but we are going to figure that out. Okay, so this is our 3D model file, which is in the share models subdirectory. And so now we're going to change hello Vrui, and we are going to change it so that that instead of showing the error message here or the welcome message, we are going to load this. We're going to load this model, and now I have to remind myself how this works. So Vrui has a opt Vrui 14.1 include Vrui scene graph manager has a scene graph manager, and we are going to use the scene graph manager to load a scene graph. Okay, so this is pretty simple. We just have to say load scene graph and give it the source URL. So that would, and then how do we get the scene graph manager? We are going to the Vrui kernel and we say get scene graph manager, and then we are going to call the load scene graph method on that. And then we are just going to say / share models hellovrui.wrl.world. And then we are going to, this is going to return to us a pointer to a scene graph node. And then the easiest thing to do is that, you know what, let's do the following. Let's just get a reference to the scene graph manager. I'm just too lazy to type this all the time. The Vrui scene graph manager returns a pointer. So we're going to use a reference and then say sgm.load scene graph. And then we're going to use another method of the scene graph, and we're going to add a node to, where is it? We're going to add a node to navigational space. So we're going to add the node, the scene graph node that we just loaded, to the navigational space root node. Vrui has two spaces in which it works. There's navigational space and physical space. I don't want to talk about the difference. Add navigational node, reference to node. I don't want to talk about the differences right now. You can look that, we can, that's a topic for another day. And then we do it like this. Okay. And that is basically it. We loaded the scene graph and we added it to the navigational Vrui scene graph. And that is pretty much it. Oh, of course, obviously we have to also include the header file for the scene graph manager, right? Okay, let's see what happens. I'm just gonna make hello Vrui, and I have the impression that we are going to be getting some error messages. Yep, there we go. Okay. Cannot convert scene graph graph node pointer to scene graph graph node reference. Oh, lol. I forgot that add navigational node takes a reference to a node. The reason for that is to, make it a little bit less error prone with reference counting. Nodes are reference counted. So we have to put a star in there because a load scene graph gives us a pointer, a shared pointer, a managed pointer, and then we just pass the thing that the pointer actually points to the add navigational node class. And then here it gives us some more details that yes, okay. All right, let's do that again. Okay, that worked. Let's run it. And let's see if I got our scene graph right, because I never remember. Okay. All right, got it. So this got terminated because when we loaded hellovrui.world in line 25, there's an unknown field, justify. Oh, okay. So it turns out that, I just remember, justify is a field of the font style node, not the text node. Because this is just a model file, we don't have to recompile. Well, will you look at that? We have text. Obviously, we can't read this text, and we're going to fix that in just a moment, but we have text. I can move it, I can move it this way, and then we can zoom in, and guess what? We have text. Look at this. It's beautiful. 3D text looks so much better than having a little dialog box. Pretty font. That's why I call it a fancy font style node. Okay. But now let's figure out why this showed up like this when we loaded it initially. and what the reason for that is. Okay, first I'm going to shut this down, and then we're going to fix this. So first of all, I'm very proud of myself that I remembered almost all of the stuff about the fancy text and fancy font style node. That's great, love it. But let's talk about what we are missing. And what happens here is that in this, actually, you know what? I was very bad about comments. Get a reference to Vrui's scene graph manager, and then load a scene graph and add it to the root navigational to the root of the navigational space graph. We're going to be talking about physical space versus navigational space in some later installation of this. Okay, so what are we missing? We created a Vrui application. We loaded a scene graph and added it to Vrui's central scene graph, which means it's going to be displayed. Awesome. But it didn't show up in the right orientation, and it also didn't show up in the size that we wanted. So here's how that works. We never initialized what we want Vrui to show us when we load the program. It's just going to show us some default view of a scene, but because it has no idea how big the scene is and around what point the scene is centered and what the up direction should be, it just showed us whatever. And we were lucky in this case that this scene graph, that the text node is centered around the origin point, and by default Vrui puts the origin in the center of the window, so we kind of saw it. Otherwise it might have even been off screen. Okay, so without further ado, what we need is we need to tell Vrui where our model is and how we would like to look at it. And so what we are going to do is we are going to implement one more of those. We're going to implement one of those virtual methods in the application class, and the one we are going to implement is called reset navigation. Reset navigation is called when you ask Vrui to reset the navigation, and is also going to be called automatically when you start a Vrui application. And so here's where we can tell Vrui what we would like to see in the window. Which part of our model space, of our navigational space, do we want to see in the window? And the way that it works is pretty straightforward. There is a function in Vrui's kernel interface, and that is called set navigation transformation. And there's many different many different versions of this. But the one we are going to use just uses a point, which is going to be the center point going to be in the screen. And because our scene graph happens to be, actually, no, let's not do this. Okay, no, we do this. Happens to be around the origin. We can use the origin. And then the next thing is we are going to give it a size of things that we want to display. And if you look at our model file here, I said size 2.0, which is the font size, the font height. So this font or this text is 2 units high. These units are in whatever unit your navigation space is. So I'm going to approximate, it's probably about 5 units wide. And so here we can tell Vrui that we would like to see something that is approximately 5 units wide. And so we are doing this. And if you think about this, what we just did here, by having these two settings, we defined a sphere of interest. This sphere has a center point, in this case the origin of the coordinate system, and then it has a radius. And so what this version of Vrui's set navigation transformation function does is it tells Vrui, hey, what I like to see is inside this sphere. Make it so that that sphere shows up very prominently in the display. And then there's a last optional parameter where we can define the vector that we want to have pointing up. And what happened is that our font didn't show up correctly because we were looking at it from the top, because by default in this desktop setting, Vrui has the Z direction going up, but VRML has the Y direction going up. So we're going to tell Vrui that we would like to have the Y direction pointing up like this. Okay, let's save that. And now we have to actually remake it. So I'm just going to run make again. And then we run HelloVrui again. And will you look at that? It turned out beautifully. Not exactly beautifully, because you notice how the text is a little bit too high, because the origin is exactly here. It's in the middle of the text, but it's also at the baseline. I would prefer it if it were like, whoops, wrong button, if it were like this. Oh, by the way, now that we have a reset navigation function, whenever I get myself in a state where I maybe, whoopsie, don't even see the stuff, I can just go to the main menu and view and say reset view, or I can just hit the window key and the home key, and then it will recenter by just calling that reset navigation method. So how can we make this a little bit better, so that if we change our font size, which we can of course just do by changing it over here, let's say to 4.0, and if we run our program now, obviously the font and the text is going to be way too big, we can do better than that, right? So the idea here is now that we can ask our scene graph manager to tell us, please give me the extents of the navigational scene graph, which is this function or method right here, which is calc navigational bounding box, and it returns a scene graph : box. Okay, so let's do that. We are going to call this method retrieve our scene graphs. Okay, so scene graph box, we call it bbox, is equal to, and then we need another reference to the scene graph manager, but we're just going to copy it. Actually, you know what? I am lazy. We are just going to copy this. So then we can just call sgm.calc navigational bounding box. Okay, and the bounding box is just a structure that has 2 points in it, a minimum and a maximum. And so what we can do now, the first thing is we want to get the center of the bounding box, right? So we can simply do that by saying geometry. There's a whole geometry in Vrui, and then we call it mid. I think it's called mid. And we just say bbox min and bbox.max. And then instead of centering everything around the origin, we center it around the center of the bounding box, okay? And then we also want to define a radius. And so here what we can do is we can simply calculate the distance between the minimum and the maximum. So the complete bbox.max, this is the full distance, and because we want a radius, we want to divide this by 2, right? And then we copy this over here, and I hope that that is going to work. Let's see. Let's make it, and let's run it, and will you look at that? It's a little bit too big. Why is it too big? Because our window doesn't cover the entire screen. So let's just, instead of dividing it by 2, let's just divide it by 1.5. Just, you know, make... There you go, beautiful. Okay, so now as you notice, it's fully centered. We are no longer centered on the baseline. And we have our beautiful text all in 3D. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Now this, should we close it here? No, actually there's one more thing that I would like to do, and that is, of course, Vrui is a VR toolkit, but right now we've only seen stuff in Vrui's desktop mode. So let's maybe actually run this in VR, but for that I need to grab a few things. Okay, I need to make some space. I haven't actually connected the headset yet. Okay, let's do that. We are going to first start our stuff. We're going to start the Vrui runtime. And okay, perfect. We just it automatically started. So we have the 2 servers that are running the show. We have the tracking driver and the compositing server running. The HMD is already detected. So let me just get up and grab that. Okay, I'm back, and then we're going to turn on the controllers. Okay, and they should show up here in this display any second. And yep, there we go, and they're fully charged. Will you look at that? I'm going to pop out this management thing and then going to make this thing disappear. Okay, so this is the Vrui monitor. All right, so now we have our head device running. We have the controllers running. And now we can run our application again, but now we are going to run it on the head-mounted display. And there are multiple ways of achieving that. But I'm going to do it in the probably most simple way. I'm going to say, I probably need to get the path for this. You know what? Hang on 1 second. What is our path right now? We are just going to put the Vrui bin directory at the beginning of our path, right? I should have done that earlier. I apologize for that. Opt vrui-14.1/bin and then the rest of the path. Okay, so now we can just run the onHMD. There you go, perfect. So now we can run the onHMD script, which just takes the application and runs it on an HMD, and then we are going to run the application, and well, will you look at that? Here it is in glorious VR. Here are my controllers. These are index controllers. I can now pick this up, move it around. Beautiful. It was in the wrong orientation. Right now we are seeing a third-person view. We have a separate camera, which can be controlled. Well, not right now. I forgot to set this up. But if I put the headset on, we should be able to. No, I forgot to set that up. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm going to put the headset on, and guess what? There is a Vrui text, HelloVrui, floating right there, and I can see it, and I can admire it in its full, awesome three-dimensionality. And there we go. We now have not only written a Vrui application, but we have written it and run it not just in desktop mode, but also in VR mode. And it shows up this way because I forgot to configure the environment. We never did room setup, basically, which is why it showed up in the wrong orientation. The default clearly doesn't match how my VR system, how my base stations are actually configured. And so, yeah, this is going to be where we close today. I hope that you had a fun time following along. And until next time, okay, now I of course need to shut this down. So ignore that I'm still talking. We have to press escape to get out of here. I'm going to, why is there no, oh, right. I need to go back to here. I need to shut down my drivers, which will turn everything off. Okay, that should not happen, but let's ignore that for now. And now we are finally done. So thank you very much for watching. And I hope that you will be with us again at the next installation in this little series. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.